जो भी उम्मीदवार 50% से एक 20 जायद वोट लेगा वो भारत का नया सदर मुंतखब हो जाएगा। इंटरनेशनल क्रिकेट काउंसिल की नई टेस्ट रैंकिंग में पाकिस्तान के अजहर अली 8वें नंबर पर हैं, जबकि टॉप 10 बॉलरों में कोई पाकिस्तानी बॉलर शामिल नहीं। टेस्ट प्लेयर्स की ताज़ा रैंकिंग में ऑस्ट्रेलिया कप्तान स्टोन स्मिथ बदस्तूर पहले नंबर पर हैं। इंग्लैंड के जो रूट दूसरे, न्यूजीलैंड के केन विलियमसन तीसरे नंबर पर हैं। बॉलिंग में भारत के रविंद्र जडेजा का पहला नंबर है, जबकि श्रीलंका के रंगना हेराथ दूसरे और भारतीय स्पिनर रविचंद्र अश्विन तीसरे नंबर पर हैं।
सामीन, ये थी इस वक्त तक की अपडेट्स। मजीद अपडेट्स के साथ आपकी खिदमत में दोबारा हाजिर होंगे। तब तक के लिए अल्लाह हाफिज।
Local, national and international news. This is Salaam Radio.
This is Salaam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim Community Radio. Broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Assalamu alaikum brothers and sisters, good evening and welcome to Let's Talk, your weekly current affairs show with me, Hamid Chowdhury, and my co-host Akil Halil. The show's brought to you on Salaam Radio 106.2 FM, and also for our Luton listeners, Assalamu alaikum. The show's brought to you by Inspire FM. We're also available on salamradio.co.uk. You can find us on social media at Salaam Radio, YouTube Live, or via iOS Android apps. We're always on air 24/7, 365, uniting all communities. Please do get involved. We'd love to hear from you. Love to have your opinions as always, and calling us on 01733 602 133, or you can text and WhatsApp us on 07745 278 978. Tonight, inshallah, we'll be talking about the siege of Masjid al-Aqsa, what it means to live as Muslim in Jerusalem, and the impact of the apartheid regime. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
How are you?
Oh, alhamdulillah. Yourself?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad. So, like I said, we're talking about the siege of Al-Aqsa and what it means to live as Muslim in Jerusalem, and the impact of the apartheid regime. And to discuss that and everything else to do with this topic, we have our resident Imam Mahmood Hassan Kohli. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi, brother Hamid. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, not
and brother Aqil, doing good?
Alhamdulillah.
I've actually been here on your show before.
Yes,
this
I know.
was pre-brother Aqil days.
Yeah.
Oh, so this must have been last year then.
It was one of the best shows we ever had.
I can imagine.
Honestly.
Yeah, no, I can.
Just setting a standard.
Unreal.
So it's good to be back, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, jazakallah.
Yes, voted for one show and look at it.
Okay, alhamdulillah. You yourself have lived in the tail end of the South African apartheid, so I think it'll be good to kind of get your unique insight. But before we get there, you did Jummah Khutbah on this very topic today, and I guess that's something to do with the national, international call to do Jummah Khutbahs on this topic?
Yes, myself, like I'm sure many other speakers and imams, not just in the UK but globally, have spoken about the atrocity in Palestine in the Jummah Khutbah. So they dedicated the Jummah sermon and the Jummah address, the Friday sermon, to the plight of the Palestinians. And I'm sure we're all aware of what's occurring as we even speak right now. There's many events that are unfolding. So definitely, I think this was a global effort of dedicating at least the Friday sermon to our Palestinian brothers and sisters.
You in your khutbah you mentioned that and incidentally for those listeners, you're the Imam at Masjid Khatija, so your khutbah was at Masjid Khatija. In your khutbah you mentioned you talked about Al-Aqsa and Masjid Al-Aqsa and the importance of Masjid Al-Aqsa, and I think just for the listeners out there who maybe aren't aware, and you also mentioned that a lot of people, one, they don't know about the importance of Masjid Al-Aqsa, certainly from a Muslim perspective, and two, some people are just not aware of what's going on in Palestine itself. So just on Masjid Al-Aqsa, I mean, if you could just briefly give us an insight into the importance of Masjid Al-Aqsa and
okay, in terms of statistics and pedantic details, I'm sure you'd be providing that soon, but a quick overview of what's occurring there at the moment is 1 week ago, precisely last week Friday, the Palestinian Muslim brothers and sisters were actually prevented from offering the Friday prayer at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And Al-Aqsa is the third holiest mosque for Muslims, and amongst many other merits in the Islamic tradition. So they were actually prevented from offering the Friday prayer, and so it's been exactly a week. And for 2 days, so it wasn't just the Friday prayer, for 2 days the masjid was shut down and it was closed, and the actual Aqsa compound, so not just the masjid, even the Aqsa compound was closed. And thereafter on Sunday it was reopened. And lo and behold, when they entered, they discovered that there were extra CCTV spy cameras and airport-style security gates, metal detectors and so on. So as part of the resilience of the Palestinians that they've been displaying for many decades, they refused to enter the compound in this humiliating manner. And why do I say this is humiliating is because, firstly, if you just take your personal house, if I look at my house or your house and something like this occurs, it's absolutely humiliating. Even if you take your place of worship, this is an open violation of not just human rights but just human dignity as well. So because if they do attend in this manner through these security gates, then it's an implicit recognition of the sovereignty of Israel even over the holy place and the holy mosque.
So these gates are just in the Masjid Al-Aqsa compound. They're not on the Wailing Wall, or they're not in other areas.
In the Aqsa compound. And I mean, to get for the ordinary Palestinian citizen to get to Al-Aqsa, they have to go through gates like this anyway. But now these are additional gates in the Al-Aqsa compound as well. So imagine having these gates at your mosque, at your local mosque. Before you enter, before you get to the shurak, you got to take off everything and go through these security gates, and you got to be frisked and so on. So obviously, as a response to this and as a refusal to enter in this manner, they actually offered the Friday prayer last week Friday, because last week Friday they would refused from entering, so they offered the prayer outside in the streets and the the alleys and so on. And after the ban was lifted. On Sunday onwards, even then, they continued, refusing to enter the compound until, they requested that these spy cameras be removed and so on. However, this Friday, the Jumu'ah prayer today, permission was granted for Palestinians to enter, but for men over the age of 50. So men under the age of 50 were not allowed to enter Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, and that's majority of the population, even human population. We have the younger generation. So if you under the age of 50 and you're a male, they were prevented and banned from entering the Al-Aqsa compound. And so they refused to enter the Al-Aqsa compound. And even today, the Salat al-Jumu'ah, the Friday prayer, was offered outside on the streets. And, there was clashes and so on. And I think at the moment, I'm not too sure what the rate is, but close to 400 individuals injured and 3 lives lost as well, sadly.
So I guess just to set a picture, sometimes when we go to the masjid to do our Jummah prayer, we sort of 10 minutes before or half an hour before the khutbah, if you want to catch the khutbah. But generally, a lot of people are kind of rushing and getting there and finding a place to pray. So in this instance, in just generally, I guess, in Jerusalem and people going for Jummah and Masjid Al-Aqsa, and now in particular with these turntables or these security gates, I guess they must be leaving home earlier in the morning to even get to the Masjid Al-Aqsa, be passed through all these checkpoints and gates and stuff.
And despite that, I don't think there's even a guarantee that they will make it for the Friday prayer.
Subhanallah, yeah.
So
I think what you just said there actually isn't just going to Masjid Al-Aqsa. They're leaving in the morning just trying to go to work or see family members in another area.
Go to school,
anything. Maybe it's really early in the morning because they know part of their existence now is to be stopped, searched, potentially seized, turned away, etc. So they've factored that into their daily commute, for want of a better word. And I don't think that's any different from going to Masjid Al-Aqsa.
Yeah, subhanallah. I mean, life is difficult there, but maybe the Israelis would argue that over the years, not so much recently, but previously they have seen what they would class as terror attacks and people going and killing Israelis and so on and so forth. So these are necessary need to be able to do this.
Yes, what actually led to the the shutdown of the Al-Aqsa compound was a deadly shooting as well. But I mean, these CCTV cameras are installed, and there was this closure and so on in the name of security and restoring peace and so on. But I mean, there's continuous land grabbing. There's continuous, violation of human rights. There's continuous, imprisonment, torture, double standards. I mean, are these positive or active factors that lead to peace? I don't think. This is everything but the recipe to peace. It's actually the recipe to disaster.
I agree with you. I mean, essentially, the Israeli forces have responded to mass prayer. This is what's happened today, and protests today, by firing tear gas and bullets. That's what's happened today. That's been their response
to disperse people from praying outside on the.
Well, they are saying it's for the protesting.
Okay. Right. Okay.
But images on TV show things differently.
Right.
But as the Sheikh was just saying as well, I mean, at the tally at the moment is over 400 injured, and 3 have passed away. Some really sad stories amongst them as well. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, one party is essentially trying to go back to where they normally could go, like for example to pray at the mosque, and they've been prevented to do so. You are right. 2 police officers were killed. There's footage of that online, and so that's why the Israeli security forces are trying to control the situation. But like the brother just said, one day these detectors are not there, and the second day they're there. But further to that, the Palestinians were advised not to actually go through the metal detectors, because by doing so they're going to legitimize them. So they've stopped doing that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that's really important to note as well at the moment is
we're advised by
their own authorities, like Palestinian Authority, etc.
Right.
Say, look, if you go through this, so I think it was actually the Grand Mufti.
Their leaders as well.
Their leaders, yeah. And say, look, if you start using these, they're going to think, well, this is the only way we can do it.
Yeah, it becomes a normal.
It becomes normal. They don't want to do that. They disagree fundamentally with the fact that they've been erected there in the first place.
Right.
I think it's really important to note as well, at this time of year, it's a Jewish holiday. It's Sukkot, I believe it's called. Where Jews would historically make pilgrimages to that compound, which they call the Temple Mount. The compound has been managed by Islamic authorities since the 12th century, and Israel has acted carefully not to intrude too much. So that's what's happened previously. I know there's been tensions over the years, but this certainly seems to be the worst time.
Okay.
Certainly in recent memory, this seems to be the worst time that, there's been a clampdown, there's been a prevention of people who worshippers going about their normal business in the name of crime prevention and security, etc.
Yeah.
From my point of view, on a personal level, I don't see any issues with having the CCTV, but I do see the issues there with metal detectors, which weren't there previously, because like the brother said, everybody's being vetted before they get there, checked to some degree before they go there anyway.
I guess the issue is probably the fact that if it's in this kind of segregated manner, in this kind of targeted, where you're targeting one community over and above any other community. So if they had CCTVs around the entire historical the site, and there was some valid security reasons, then people might not argue with that. But currently it is one, and I guess to a large extent is an Israeli policy to kind of do that, current policy.
Anyway. I'm not too sure if you viewed that video that went viral on social media of that American, I think she was an American lady, that during this week, the only individuals that were seen around in the compound roaming freely were Israeli settlers and tourists.
Yeah, and that's correct. You're right.
There was this video of this lady saying, singing and joyously that this is exactly precisely what we need. Just look at the peace right now. See, look at the quiet right now when there's no Arabs and there's no Palestinians.
Yeah, that's right.
Palestinians here.
That was on Wednesday. Yeah. Wednesday, around 100 Israelis were given access to the square outside the mosque, accompanied by foreign tourists.
And you see, the reason why this is, I mean, as you said, this tension is ongoing, and I think many of us were born into this as well. So it's ongoing. It's got a long history behind it as well. Since the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Balfour Declaration, and so on and so forth. World War, at the end of World War One, the British mandate and expiration of British mandate, and so on. But it's in the past 50 years. After 50 years, this is the first time this has happened where the Friday prayer has not been called. And to the Muslim community, the Friday prayer, people, we try to pray regularly and offer our prayers daily, but the Friday prayer is central to the life of every believer, religious or otherwise, practicing or otherwise. So it's been in the past 50 years, since 50 years, 1969 I think. This is the first time this has happened, and this is the reason why it's created such an uproar. And there's been protests of solidarity, not just in Palestine but in many countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, Turkey, and many of the Middle Eastern countries as well, in Africa, and many of these countries.
And do you think the fact that they are so emboldened to do this is the wider political relationships they have with Saudi Arabia, for example, and other countries where they are seeing that actually, in a sense, that we won't get the backlash that we probably would ordinarily get? I know King of Jordan, he asked for it to be Al-Aqsa to be open, and all these security things to be removed because there's an intrusion and it's against people's right to practice their religion freely. So and I'm sure others have done as well. But whereas before they around that particular area, they didn't want to disrupt that too much, because they do call it Temple Mount. I was listening to a Al Jazeera report actually earlier on today, where the police officer, although the Al Jazeera correspondent was referring to it as Masjid Al-Aqsa compound, he refused. He kept mentioning Temple Mount. So in as far as their minds are concerned, it's not Masjid Al-Aqsa, it's Temple Mount, and so that kind of gives an indication of where they want it to be. So really, in them preventing Muslims or preventing anyone entering the masjid, all that is probably a step in the direction of re-establishing the Temple Mount. What do you think about that?
Yes, definitely it is. I mean, that piece of land and that region, that area is dear to all three of the Abrahamic faiths and tradition, and it's in both in the Gospels as well as in the Quran. In fact, the Quran states that it's a land that's promised to the Israelites as well. But then we need to understand that there needs, like over you just mentioned since the 12th century, right? I think what you've mentioned, right? And even prior to that as well, there's always been this pluralism there. And this peaceful coexistence that's there. That's all people are demanding. Yeah. And I mean, this is open, right? Violation of human rights, land grabbing, house grabbing, all of these things. How could this be tolerated? We're living at a time where, recently I was seeing there's a gorilla, a baboon that was suing a photographer, right? When that image went violent. When people are so sensitive about these things, and then when things like this occur, all of a sudden there's this double standard. I mean, you must have seen these images as well. Amongst the Muslim worshippers that were offering the Friday prayer on the streets, there were many Jewish individuals that were there, many adherents of the Christian faith that were standing shoulder to shoulder, and they understand. So, this is not a case of, Muslims against, this is not anti-Semitism, Muslims against the Jewish community. It's a struggle against the Zionist state of Israel, against those that have illegitimately occupied, the land there in Palestine. But then again, this is dear to, as you said, to Muslims, to the Jewish community, as well as to the Christian community as well. Definitely.
I mean, just talking about the Zionist state of Israel, which I think effectively wraps up what it is, and the kind of apartheid system, what many would call an apartheid system. I mean, does that correlate with your experience in South Africa, growing up in South Africa?
Every experience is different. But even though this has been labelled as as an apartheid regime, even referred to by Nelson Mandela on many occasions as well, and his support for the Palestinian cause is quite known as well. So I was born during the tail end of apartheid. I don't want to give away my date of birth. I'm still young. But anyway, when Nelson Mandela was elected, we were kids at that time in 1994. The inauguration, and there was this excitement, there was this flash of hope and opportunity and so on. And I remember as kids, when we'd walk around, even though at that time we personally did not experience apartheid because we were towards the end, but it was around us. We could see segregations. When you go to the beaches, there's whites only, blacks. When you go to buses, on public transport, in certain areas where there's it's heavily dense population of this particular ethnicity and this particular group. So, we saw these things, and we seen them in front of us. We didn't actually, live through the experience, obviously, because we're quite young. But obviously, our parents and those, the others did live through this pitiful and bitter experience as well. But definitely, this is also an apartheid, obviously. Yes.
I mean, the psychological impact from stories from your parents or from your uncles and aunts, would have been there living under such an oppressive, regime, effectively, the apartheid system. People must have felt angry and and frustrated that they didn't have the same opportunities as just because they were born with a different skin color.
Definitely. Yes, so there's this rage, and there's this anger that's there as well. But again, there's ways of fighting oppression, and that's exactly the South African history of things, and obviously with a leader like the late Nelson Mandela. I don't think if anyone else was in his position could have done any better. And hence, overnight from a terrorist to a hero, Nelson Mandela. We have his statue here in London as well. So definitely it does have the psychological impact. As kids, we were in school, we were taught the history as well. And I know instances, and we've spoken to people. I visited Robben Island in Cape Town, the prison where Nelson Mandela and many others were imprisoned. So anyway, when they tell us the tale and we read about, where you had to walk around, they call this the Dom Pass, particular ID card that you had to walk around. There was this curfew after a particular time at night. You cannot be seen outside on the street, otherwise you'd be arrested straight away. People are just picked up, and no one knows, even until today, people don't know where their family members are. It's so many years have passed. So, this is exactly what it is when you made to walk through these security gates, and you constantly monitor. There's always this eye of suspicion that you are looked at. And as Brother Aqil said as well, kids are leaving home and in the morning hugging their parents. We don't know whether we'd see you back after school or not. Husbands are doing the same thing, wives are doing, parents, children, everyone's doing the same thing. Even as we're speaking today, these are victims in hospitals. Even the victims themselves are not safe. People are not allowed to enter and so on. So this is apartheid.
It's effectively the world's largest open prison.
It is.
Well, Gaza is.
And then there's that element of mental institutionalization going on. And like I said previously to you before, a daily reality of a Palestinian in the city is discrimination in services, arrest raids and brutality, settler expansion, demolitions and displacement. There can be no one who can dispute that.
Yeah, I was watching a program more recently actually, where they were talking about these raids they do. There's actually a system that they do night raids, and the primary purpose of the night raid is to not allow Palestinians to feel a sense of security and safety.
Yeah.
We're talking about in West Bank, in those kind of which are traditionally known as Palestinian Authority areas. There is constant fear of being woken up in the middle of the night, being dragged out of your bed, and children and babies being dragged out at the end of a gun to stand outside while these security forces go in and disrupt the house, and there's no valid reason for doing so. It's just that because they will get told, okay, we need to go to this village today and we need to do a night raid. It's a systematic process of humiliation and disruption.
I've got some breaking news for you. Palestinian President Abbas is freezing contact with Israel after at least 3 Palestinians were killed in a dispute over contested shrine. So that's just broken just now.
Yeah. I would take that seriously only if I thought that President Abbas's position was strong. It's not. His territory. This wall that they're building, which is against they've been building for probably over a decade now, which is against, according to the UN, is against human rights. Is all in Palestinian territory land.
Yes.
And that's where the humiliation happens. It's the Israeli settler roads are crisscrossing around this land. Settler colonies. They're building settlements faster than they've ever done before. It's a real state of I don't know, for people living there. It must be real despair.
Picking up from the point that you just mentioned a while ago. Interestingly, what led to the closure of the Al-Aqsa compound, because this is current right now. It's this statement that's made of disproportionate action. We all stand for justice. Be it regardless of who the perpetrator is. We need to stand for justice, right? Yeah. So this deadly shooting, right? Justice needs to be met against the perpetrators. But then why this disproportionate action? Where there's mass punishment. The entire Palestinian brethren are being punished for the actions of just a few, one or two. And, I was reading on social media, reports of individuals who are actually fleeing the protest. Right, they protest, fleeing, but despite that, they were being shot at. You know, they fired at with these, bullets, rubber bullets and tear gas canisters, and so on. So it's the statement that's been made that you don't even raise your voice, you don't even demand justice.
Yeah.
Even though there's open a violation of human rights, it's okay. We need to normalize this. You need to remain dehumanized. That's what it is. Yeah. And I did mention that. I'm not too sure how much of time we do have, because I'll be leaving shortly as well. But as a closing statement, I think I did mention this in my Jummah khutbah as well. And I think what's important as a Muslim radio station here as well, and as our majority Muslim listeners as well, is what can we do, Muslim and otherwise. What can we do? Right. There's a lot that could be done. And I'd mentioned a few points in the Jummah khutbah as well, and I would mention this now as well. Firstly, I think it's awareness, and this is a good step. Dedicating a show towards this, it's creating this awareness. I think as families, we need to sit down. Let's educate ourselves, regarding the history behind this conflict. The Arab-Israeli conflict, and the Islamic tradition. What does the Islamic tradition say about this as well? So the first point, I think, is awareness. There's a good book, I think, if to make a start. And I read this quite a few years ago, and I have actually intended to read it again. It's actually titled, it's by David Fromkin, A Peace to End All Peace. A Peace to End All Peace. Have you read it, Brother Hamid? I know you're quite a voracious reader.
No, I haven't.
But anyway, it's
he used to be.
It was authored. He used to read. Okay, it's a quite old book, 1989, I think it was authored in, but it's still quite relevant. A Peace to End All Peace: The End of the Ottoman Empire and the Creation of the Creation of the Modern Middle East, or something like that. So that's a good book to start off with. So number one, I think, is awareness, education. Number one. Number two, 1 minute, inshallah. 30 seconds. Okay. Number two.
20 seconds. Actually.
No problem. Number two, I think we should take it upon ourselves to visit to visit Palestine, inshallah.
Yeah, inshallah.
So together with your trip to Pakistan or wherever it is, try to visit the Al-Aqsa compound and show your support to these individuals.
Jazakallah khair, Imam Hassan. Really appreciate you coming on here, and inshallah do join us. We're just going for a break. Assalamu alaikum.
Stay tuned to Salaam Radio after this short ad break.
1 in every 10 people live without access to safe, clean water. Let's give them a better choice than drinking either dirty water or no water at all. Together, we can turn this desperate situation around by delivering safe water solutions to the world's poorest people. Call 0161 225 0225 or visit humanappeal.org.uk.
Do you have lots of clutter at home or in the office that needs to be kept but nowhere to keep it? Ivet Self-Storage offers a secure, affordable, clean and dry home for your belongings. We have security systems in place which are monitored 24 hours a day, ensuring that your items are safe. With a simple monthly payment, Ivet Self-Storage provides secure and tailored facilities to meet your specific requirements, whether short or long term. We offer the best prices and longest opening hours in Peterborough. For more information, please call on 01733 306 456 or visit us at Ivet Way, Westwood.
Third world and developing countries are home to some of the most vulnerable children on the planet. Malnutrition, severe lack of medical aid and access to clean water are just some of the horrific challenges faced by orphans across Africa and Asia. Children of Adam, a Peterborough charity, need your help to bring aid to these orphans for just £25 a month. To sponsor an orphan or assist with other projects, please call 0300 321 0032 or visit www.childrenofadam.net.
City Homes Estate Agents are your #1 independent family-owned agency in Peterborough. We offer a range of services including buying, selling, letting, mortgages and conveyancing. Why not call us today and find out for yourself why our customers return time and time again. We have a track record for achieving some of the highest prices in and around the area for our clients. With over 10 years of operating in the area, we are the experts in this business market. Put us to the test today by calling 01733 348 677 and quote discount code radio for our exclusive rates for this promotion. City Homes, bringing people together for over 10 years.
मेरा नाम आयशा है और मेरा ताल्लुक कश्मीर ऑर्फन्स रिलीफ ट्रस्ट मीरपुर से है। कोर्ट एजुकेशनल कम्प्लेक्स जरीकस मेरे ख्वाबों की जन्नत, जहां बेहतरीन देखभाल, आला तालीम, बेपनाह प्यार और मेहरबान शफकत हम सबको हासिल है। अब फेज 2 में 500 बच्चों और बच्चियों के लिए रिहायशगाहें बन रही हैं और इसके लिए 9 करोड़ रुपए चाहिए। मुझे यकीन है आप मायूस नहीं करेंगे।
कश्मीर ऑर्फन्स रिलीफ ट्रस्ट 0300 123 774 court.org.uk.
I got up early one morning and rushed right into the day. I had so much to accomplish that I didn't have time to pray. Problems just tumbled around me and heavier became each task. Why doesn't God help me, I wondered. He answered, you don't ask. I wanted to see joy and beauty, but the day toiled and grey and bleak. I wondered why God didn't show me. He said, but you didn't seek. I tried to come into God's presence. I used my key at the lock. God gently and lovingly chided my servant who didn't knock. I woke up early this morning and paused before entering the day. I had so much to accomplish that I had to take the time to pray.
This is Salaam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim community radio. Broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Welcome back. You're listening to Let's Talk on Salaam Radio 16.2 FM. And for our Luton listeners, as always, Assalamu alaikum. It's brought to you by Inspire FM. Alhamdulillah, just before we went on for our break, we were talking about the siege of Masjid al-Aqsa, and we had Imam Mahmoud Hassan Khawli talking about Masjid al-Aqsa and what it means to Muslims, and how this siege is so dangerous and so unprecedented in recent times, certainly for the last 50 or so years, because it's the first time in the last 50 or so years that there has been a Jummah prayed there, and I think he gave some very, I mean, it was a great insight and some very pearls of wisdom towards the end, where he talked about the fact that we need to take it as a responsibility upon ourselves to learn about what's happening in Palestine, and to learn about the conflict that is rearing there between the Arab-Israeli conflict, to then tell other people, to raise the awareness. It should be it's a mandate upon ourselves to do that. And thirdly, to actually visit Masjid al-Aqsa. Many of us don't do that. Many of us do not. Actually, it's not even on our agenda to do that, Keel. Yet I think it's. I mean, I've not been there, and I think it's something that we should really do, because one shows support for the Palestinians there. Two, gives you greater awareness, hands-on experiencing and immersion, and for you to kind of see what's going on. What do you think? I mean,
I know a few people who've been.
Okay,
and you are right. They've said they were humbled.
Yeah.
And the educational element, there's more of an affiliation to something you've seen.
That's
you've
right,
been around and you've seen the struggles and things like that. I just wanted to pick up a couple of things after that as well, what the Sheikh was saying as well. But I agree with you. Education, awareness. I think also an element of detaching yourself emotionally from the situation and looking at the facts.
Yes, absolutely.
Would certainly help you to understand this, because it's quite easy as a Muslim or anyone who's affiliated to the cause in any which way, shape or form. It's easy to look at this in an emotional sense. But this is far bigger than any one emotion. This is the eradication of human rights. This is the eradication of the ability to just freedom of prayer. Freedom of movement. We've been through this, so I'm not going to go through all that.
Basic civil rights.
Basic civil rights have been eroded.
Or even human rights, rather.
Exactly, human rights have been eroded. But when you step out slightly from the images you see, things like that, and start looking at this from a different angle, and like you said, you visit there and you learn about it. You learn about the people, the culture, and things like that. And I know we're going to be talking about the Palestinian Expo that happened in the UK, which is really good. So I'm looking forward to that. But I think that's really important, because that gave everybody a different angle of heritage, for example.
Yes, that's right.
Because at the moment, the only thing we see is the oppression from one side to the other. And just most people, when they think about Palestine, they think of brutality and all these things like that. And so
I mean, it's partly, I guess partly is fear that there is an orchestrated way to make Muslims afraid to go there, because you're right, it is our heritage, and just like the Masjid Haram, in Makkah, Masjid Nabwi in Medina, Masjid Aqsa is one of those, three main holy places, or for Muslims, as the Prophet said, if you want to visit any masjid and get reward for it, visit free Masjid Haram, Masjid Medina Nabawi, and Masjid Aqsa.
Yeah, and to that end, what I want to just add a few things to this is the Jerusalem's Grand Mufti Muhammad Hussein insisted that the compound was a holy site for Muslims only, while a member of the Knesset, Israel's parliament, Jamal Zakala, says he fears that tens of thousands of Jewish worshippers would be allowed to visit the area around the Al-Aqsa Mosque. He's quoted as that in AFP. Now, if the violence doesn't stop, Israel's public security minister, Yitzhak, I don't know if I'm going to say this properly, Aronovich, says he will close the compound completely if Muslims and Jews cannot go in peace amongst one another. We want, and I quote, we want the compound to stay open for Muslims and Jews, but if Jews can't go there, neither can Muslims, the minister was quoted saying by military radio.
I mean, quite honestly, if, this idea that Jews can't go there is a bit absurd, because at the end of the day, people who are exerting control there are not the Muslims, but are the Israeli forces.
Yeah.
And they are the ones who are saying who can. I mean, as we heard from the Imam, that open today for Jummah, but only people over 50 were allowed to go there. Yeah. So
I agree with you. I understand.
He lives in a different planet. I think if he to an extent, I think it works. Within the Knesset, within the Likud party, there are far right extremists. There are terrorist organizations which are in government, which are very, very anti. I mean, they talk about the Palestinians as subhuman beings. They don't even consider them. So as far as they're concerned, they must be loving it. They're lapping all this stuff up because it works in their favor for their extremist views.
I'll back up some of what you just said there in a second, but I think it's really important now to just mention the incumbent Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu. He's essentially denied that there are any moves in place to restrict the access of Muslims to the site and blamed Palestinian extremists for violence, which was given. And I quote, and he said, "I'm committed, and Israel is committed to maintaining the status quo exactly as it has been for many decades." Okay,
I mean,
that's the sort of comment you'd expect, right?
I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, this guy, he was the one who bombarded Gaza, completely. Massacred.
That's right.
Thousands of people, women and children.
Yeah.
And then blaming it on the Palestinians themselves. I mean, my blood boils with this guy.
I understand. So I'm just going to add to what you said just previously. So meanwhile, in a separate incident on Tuesday, a mosque was set ablaze in the West Bank with the words price tag inscribed on the walls, which is the name of an Israeli vigilante group. The group has carried out numerous attacks on Palestinian, Israeli, Arab and church property in the West Bank and Israel, saying their aim is to exact a price for any opposition to settlement building in the area. And that's from RT.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the settlers, a lot of the settlers are extreme right-wing people, right? And they walk around with guns under the protection of the Israeli army, and they take pot shots at Palestinians.
Well, and that's what they're saying. One of the victims today was a 16-year-old boy who was shot.
Yeah.
Because somebody, Joe Bloggs, had a gun in his hand and killed him.
Yeah. I mean, the situation is so bad that Jewish people in Israel are taking time out of their day jobs, going over to these areas. I mean, I was reading one report, and he is walking Palestinian school kids to school and back because the fear that the settlers are taking pot shots at them. I mean, this is there are people have to recognize that when you talk about Israel, and you're talking about the opposition of the policies of Israel, as any state, as we can, as we should do, you're talking about these extreme right-wing. It's like the EDL carrying guns around and taking pot shots at the Muslim community under the protection of the police. I mean, that's effectively what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand that. And like I said previously as well, these people are trying to go about their daily lives. They've had all the infrastructure essentially leveled. right? That, you know, shops, schools, etc., everything is on lockdown, yet they're still trying to persevere. That Palestinian spirit is still there. It's still trying to live a daily life to a degree or to some context. The problem they have, like you just mentioned, is one, they're having to wake up potentially 0400 hours, getting their children, etc., ready. Then they're walking past a whole area which has been completely massacred, leveled. There's nothing there, and as they're going through there, they could potentially expect some sort of raid from some sort of organisation en route there. If they manage to get past this hellhole, they'll get then to a security checkpoint, which they are then kept at for hours, just for no reason, and then eventually some, and when I say some, we're not even talking triple digits, luckily to get double digits amount of people make it through, while the remainder are remaining there for the rest of the time, and by that time it's late early evening, they turn around and go back again. This is the harsh reality.
I mean, the reality of this stuff is so widely available. I was reading another incident where the journalist from might be UK, might be US, I can't remember exactly, from the Western countries, he goes there and he's asking and these people are walking from one village to another for their work purposes, and he's saying, well, why don't you take the other road, because it's like, you know, 10-minute walk, whereas this way it's going to take you 2 hours plus the checkpoint. Effectively your work period, your work time is reduced. And they said, because for no reason whatsoever, these Israelis have shut down that road and forced people to take a long-winded tour around, and part of that is a process of humiliation, part of that is a process of demonizing, and part of that is a process of making life difficult for people for no reason whatsoever, but the fact that they are occupying those lands and they are subjugating these people to, you know, inhumanity.
I think the other element here as well is, brother, obviously I know you're a lot older than me, but we're of a certain generation, okay? So we've seen this struggle for a long time. Obviously, been going on before me and you were born, right? So what we've seen is the generation before us, our generation, and certainly the next few generations ahead. Every single generation is being effectively controlled in the same way and subjected to the same sort of protocol. So that what happens is, as a young child, when you're growing up and you're 2 years old, whatever, the only thing you know is conflict. The only thing you know is a checkpoint. The only thing you know is you're not going to get a job. The only thing you know is this is the route. These are what the buildings look like. There's no green pastures. There's nothing for you to play in. The only thing you know. So, in so many ways, where you would look at trying to work with your neighbor, where you would look at developing their helping their education, so these people rise up. Instead, they've been suppressed generation after generation after generation. Given the same narrative, the world's been given the same narrative. They're given the same narrative. So, is it any wonder that the leaders are saying, "Well, we want to keep the status quo"? Well, obviously, you want to keep the status quo. And to that end, I want to just remind our listeners actually that 62% of Palestinians polled in the West Bank and Gaza want Abbas to resign. His net approval rating is -27, brother. He's struggling for relevancy. And I guess where I'm going for this now is moving slightly away from Israel itself. What about the Palestinian Authority? These people, after
Palestinian Authority is a joke.
After the death of Yasser Arafat, so much changed, and even then you could say, I suppose, in so many ways, the status quo stayed, right?
Look, but at the end of the day, sorry, Akil, at the end of the day, if you are democratically elected, you're going to be hated by the by the Israelis, right? And that was proven in Gaza, where the only party that was democratically elected by the Gazan, actually by the Palestinians, was Hamas.
Correct.
Now before the elections, I remember following this. Before the elections, there was a multi-party state, trying to get elections, and Israel was sporting one, the Americans were sporting one, and so on and so forth. And then they were like, okay, look, whoever wins, we're going to engage, etc., etc., etc. As soon as Hamas wins, suddenly it's like, we're not going to talk to you.
Correct. That is what happened.
That is what happened. And we're talking about apartheid. We mentioned apartheid a few times, and I guess the listeners probably thinking, well, you're Muslims, right?
Yes.
So you're going to have this kind of a tunneled vision towards Israelis and the state. But I want to just point out that recently as March, a UN report was released by the UN Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, ESCWA, ESCWA, which looked at the Israeli practice towards Palestinian people and the question of apartheid. And what they said was that Israel has established an apartheid regime that oppresses and dominates the Palestinian people as a whole.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a UN report.
Yeah.
After a thorough investigation, and they said that their report is based on evidence, on evidence established on the basis of scholarly inquiry and overwhelming evidence that Israel is guilty of crime of apartheid. Now, nobody can deny that. UN is an independent organization. This report is written by an independent body. And they have looked at the evidence, looked at what Israelis are doing to the Palestinian people, and they have concluded that Israel, just like in South Africa, we had the apartheid and the world stood up and destroyed the apartheid and recognized that there is no room for apartheid in our modern world, in our world of equality, fairness and justice. They have concluded that Israel is establishing an apartheid state against the Palestinian people, and they have urged the governments to back the BDS movements. This is this report has urged the governments that they must back media, and actually recommended that UN and its member states should revive the Special Committee Against Apartheid and the United Nations Center Against Apartheid. So these are serious recommendations by a serious body, and these don't come about with just emotional kind of rhetoric by people just because they feel that Israel is they think that Israel is unjust. This is clear, and I mean this is just one of many reports actually. So I don't see why anyone would from going forward from today think that Israel is anything other than an apartheid state.
No, I'm with you on that. It doesn't, like you just said. I mean, you got all these facts. There's so many reports. One can only think of how many resolutions and and such like Israel's broken.
Yes.
And how many times the neighbors, who previously you thought may be able to influence or have a conversation or have a meeting and say, look, get around the table, like for example with the Saudis and the Jordanians and all these different countries, and trying to come to some sort of resolution. But I think what you said earlier on was really pertinent, and that was Israel's comfortable right now because everything around it is crumbling, and therefore what it does with its own land as it sees fit, it can do, because who's going to say anything?
Well, the UN should be saying stuff.
And where I'm going to essentially back that up a little bit with you as well right now is when Qatar got blamed for all the things about it had affiliations with different groups, etc. You really read about the UAE and some people in Saudi Arabia, etc. Actually, the colours were coming out when they mentioned about the Palestinians. And you were like, it made you think there for a second, step back a little bit here. Like, hold on. You people should be getting involved here. They've obviously got good relations with Israel. There's no issues in terms of like any conflict issues between Saudi Arabia and Israel, or UAE and Bahrain and all the etc. Right? And so, I can't help but feel like, these people should be sitting around together with each other. I do genuinely feel there is a solution here.
Yes.
I don't think it's a two-state solution.
No, I don't agree with
previously I did, but then the more I've learned about this, the more all that will happen is it's the status quo to a certain degree will still remain. They should all be part of one country.
They should.
They should all be active citizens in one country.
Well, the problem, Akil, is that Israel today has in modern history is the longest occupier. It's been is an occupational force for the longest in modern history. And the problem with Israelis, or certainly the Israeli government and Likud party in particular, these kind of extremists, and I wouldn't shy away from calling them terrorists for a lot of what they do, and with a lot of blood on their hands, certainly of the Palestinian people, they have. The Israelis are governed by the Israeli civil law. Yet the same people living in the same area, if you happen to be a Palestinian, you're governed by the military rule, and that's why they can go and arrest you for no reason. That's why they can imprison you. That's why they can keep you in, they can take you to what they call detention centers, and that's why they can, they can do what they want with you, because you're under military rule because you're a Palestinian. But if you're an Israeli in the same area, just for the fact that you're an Israeli, you'll be governed by the Israeli civil law, and that's the reason why it's very difficult to see how until Israel takes on board democracy. I mean, it claims to be the only democratic country in the region. I don't know where it gets that, because it may be democratic in name, but it certainly doesn't exhibit any human rights characteristics, because people with human rights and dignities do not go around oppressing people just because they happen to be not from their ethnic of origin, or happen to be not following the same religion as them, or these people, if it wants to be part of the civilized world. And I would say that Israel currently is not part of the civilized world for its attempt and its attack of the Palestinian people. And if it wants to be part of the civilized world, then it has to recognize that Palestinians are human beings, and Palestinians have a right to live, and they have to, and they are afforded all the human rights that every person enjoys. And living in Israel, in Palestine, they have to be afforded the rights that every other person is given. And unless it does that, I'm sorry, Israel cannot be part of the civilized world. It is part of the barbaric, backward, apartheid regime for which it currently stands for.
Yeah, and this, what you were mentioning just there is going to require leadership on both sides. And this, and I keep stressing this, but I think it's really important. This means also the Palestinian sides. There needs to be some ownership here, proper leadership here, someone who's got a forward-thinking vision. Both sides need to work together in order for this whole situation.
But you know what?
I guess in so many ways the status quo won't change, because there's too many vested interests. There's too off the back of this whole misery for so many years. Think of the technology. Think of the industry that's born from this misery.
Yeah. But what we have to recognize that Israel is the occupying force, and as an occupying force, you have certain responsibilities under international law.
Yeah,
Palestinian Authority is not a state. It doesn't have any real authority. Its land borders, its airspace, everything is controlled by the occupying force. So Israel has a much greater responsibility towards the Palestinian people. In as little as the collection of garbage, which it doesn't do. It has a responsibility to do that, but it doesn't do that. Again, another process of systematic process of humiliation of Palestinian people. Now, the report I quoted earlier, one of the writers of that report is Richard Falk, who is a UN human rights investigator, and he said in 2014 that Israeli policies bear characteristics of criminalization, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. I mean, these are powerful words.
They are.
Effectively, killing people it's occupying.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the other element to this as well, I know we were going to discuss this. I don't know how much time we've got left, but it doesn't, unfortunately, confine itself within the border of Israel. We've had on the 8th to the 9th of July 2017 the Palestine Expo in London.
Yep.
And there was a serious, continuous attempt by Jewish lobbyists to try pro-Israeli Zionists to shut down this event.
And
it was bombarded with all kinds of information to try and shut it down. We had the community secretary Sajid Javed at one point almost cancelling this. Until they did their checks and reassured.
No, I think they took it to court actually, or something along those lines. I can't remember exactly.
Nevertheless, there was a concerted effort to stop this from happening. But this was just an event to showcase their heritage, culture. It had nothing to do with any sort of political situation or anything like that whatsoever. But the point I'm trying to make to you isn't just confined within the land of Israel.
Well, I think that the problem with the Israelis and these Zionists, these extremist Zionists, is that they don't want anyone looking at the Palestinian people and the situation in Palestine with an eye of sympathy.
Yeah.
Because that is opening a can of worms. Because they know they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing, and they have pitched over. They've created a facade which is, as weak as a spider's web. They've created a facade through which they want to show Israel as the greatest democracy as the only democracy in the Middle East. But in reality, they themselves know that is such rubbish. So what they do is that if anyone wants to talk about it, even look at it, they want to shut it down straight away. And Palestine Expo was a great example that, alhamdulillah, common sense prevailed, and they did the Palestine Expo. It was very successful. I think 10,000 people or so turned up to have a look at it. And I think it's all about perseveration and determination to succeed in this.
I think that what we should do as a community, like you said in the middle of the show, was we need to educate ourselves.
Absolutely.
We need to understand what's happening, and then visit Israel as well. But what we see, which is wrong, we should call that wrong.
Yes.
We shouldn't be a spade, and we shouldn't be afraid to voice our opinion.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And what's the easiest thing for an oppressor is to shut down anyone thinking that he's the oppressor.
Correct.
Yeah. And this is what's going on. And I think you're absolutely right. I think it's our moral responsibility, not only our Islamic responsibility, to stand on